100 miles per hour winds.
Basically, half the roof off the whole of the toilet block has come off.
Sub-zero temperatures.
As you can see, I'm in the best of health.
Overexposure.
We are a community in really difficult circumstances, and we have no doctor.
But it's not the elements they should be worried about. It's each other.
Let me finish! Let me finish!
Castaway 2000, Easter Sunday at 8 on BBC One Scotland.
This is BBC One Scotland. We're with Jackie Bird. We're reporting Scotland.
Headlines this lunchtime on Reporting Scotland. Motorola is set to take over the mothballed Hyundai site at Dunfermline. A jobs boost for Fife, but will it mean bad news elsewhere in Scotland? New claims that young teenage girls are being lured into a world of drugs and prostitution. And where do you want money spent? The Scottish Executive asks the people how to spend £17 billion. Good afternoon. The mobile phone giant Motorola is to take over the mothballed Hyundai plant near Dunfermline. Up to 2,000 jobs could be created in the move, which is expected to be confirmed tomorrow. The massive factory has never been used since it was built 4 years ago. But there are fears this lunchtime that other Motorola plants in Scotland may suffer. Over now to our business reporter Hayley Miller, who's in Fife.
Jackie, there have been dark clouds hanging over this factory behind me for some time now, ever since Hyundai decided to call it quits here in Scotland. Today, though, rather like the weather, it seems the prospect is brighter. There are now hopes that very shortly this factory could at last become home to the semiconductor industry. It was hailed as Scotland's flagship inward investment project. Instead, it became an embarrassment. The Korean giant Hyundai planned to create 1,000 jobs in the first phase here, followed by another 1,000. But not one single microchip has ever been processed. Work was halted in 1997 when the firm was hit by the Far East financial crisis. The drop in the price of silicon chips added to Hyundai's woes. Today, the prospect of work finally beginning under another company has come as a relief to Fife.
This is good news for Fife. There are a lot of new jobs coming here. There are a lot of people who were lined up to take over the jobs with Hyundai, and hopefully some of these jobs will now go to Motorola.
Motorola is expected to use the site to make microchips for the next generation of mobile phones. The company refused to comment on their plans today, but government ministers seem to be optimistic.
I know how hard Donald and Henry McLeish and the Scottish Executive have been working on this one, but it remains speculation until any definite announcement is made one way or the other on this.
Motorola employs over 6,000 people in Scotland, mostly in semiconductors. Last year it began recruiting another 1,000 workers to make mobile phones at its plant at Easter Inch near Livingston.
Hayley, without wishing to tarnish what seems like good news, might this have a knock-on effect on Motorola's other plants in Scotland?
That we don't really know and probably won't know for sure until tomorrow till we get the details from the company. There will indeed be some new jobs created, that would be expected. But Motorola does have quite a big capacity in the semiconductor side here in Scotland, particularly at its East Kilbride plant. There are well over 3,000 workers employed there. Now, it's been suggested to me that at that plant, they've maybe done a lot of upgrading over the years, and maybe it is about time that they just started again from scratch. That may not be mentioned at all by the company, because if that were to happen, it would be very much further down the line. But with the semiconductor factory, there comes a point where you can only upgrade section by section as the technology changes and advances. And it does seem that maybe Motorola have gone to the wall with their upgrading there, and that maybe through time, workers and that side of the business will transfer to this new modern plant behind me.
And how skilled will the jobs there be?
That again, we will know more for definite tomorrow, but it's likely to be a mixture. There will be manufacturing, a mixture of low and high level. It would be very good if there was some research and development, or certainly some higher level skilled jobs here. And there's certainly an expectation that for new jobs which could be created, there is indeed a skills base in Fife. We've heard earlier there that The disappointment when Hyundai pulled out that there were in fact people lined up for the jobs, and very recently there have been other similar types of investments, including ADC Telecommunications, which is bringing 1,100 jobs to the area. So it does seem like there are skills available.
Hayley Miller, thank you very much. Well, there's more good news for Fife today, with additional work expected to be announced for the Rosyth dockyard. The yard is currently involved in a £100 million refit of the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal, and already has a similar contract to follow on HMS Invincible. The MOD now says that the refit of the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious is likely to be brought forward by 2 years and allocated to the Fife yard. It'll safeguard the 2,800-strong workforce. A North East drugs agency claims dealers are luring girls as young as 13 into a life of addiction and prostitution. But the national agency, Scotland Against Drugs, insists there's no evidence of a growing problem.
Drugs worker Janice Jess says she's taken 6 calls in the past month from parents worried about their daughters. The cases all involved older girls befriending vulnerable youngsters.
In general, it's 17 to 19-year-old girls who appear to be befriending 13, 14-year-olds. And the upshot is they end up going back to what would be known as drug-dealing houses, or houses where groups congregate that would use drugs. And very soon the youngster gets involved in the drug scene. Sometimes that also involves sex for drugs. And in many occasions it's involved criminal activities, credit card theft, housebreaking, shoplifting.
Janice Jess says she'd normally expect 2 such calls a year, but the 6 have happened in the past month. She's so concerned she's written to Grampian's Chief Constable and Aberdeenshire's Director of Social Work. Grampian Police say they're extremely concerned about the claims and have pledged firm action if they prove to be true. Scotland Against Drugs say they're aware of similar cases across the country, but they insist there's no evidence to suggest it's a common problem or that it's growing. Colin White, reporting Scotland, Aberdeenshire.
Police are trying to trace a motorist who they believe caused a serious accident on the M8 near Paisley last night before fleeing from the scene. A 6-month-old baby boy and his parents were seriously injured in the crash. The couple's 2 other children are also being treated for their injuries. Detectives believe the driver was forced to swerve from the road to avoid the car, which failed to stop. If you think you know better than the politicians about how to share out public spending, well, now's your chance. The Scottish Executive wants ideas from everyone on how to spend more than £17 billion next year. Opposition leaders welcome the move, but say the consultation is limited.
This is an authentic consultation by ministers. They'll hold public meetings, they'll go online, they'll read your letters.
Every response will be considered, and where there are clear trends and themes, or even perhaps just good ideas, they will be taken on board, and I think we'll see over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see this process genuinely influencing the decisions that are made by Scottish ministers.
But equally, ministers don't want idealistic wish lists. They want the public to realise that boosting spending in one area might mean cutting another service, because the overall total is set by the Treasury. Opposition nationalists say Scotland should be able to decide everything, tax and spending.
I think everyone should get involved in the debate about how we finance public services in Scotland, but this is a one-sided budget, if you like, because we can't determine how much we put into it. It's handed down to Jack McConnell. He's got one hand tied behind his back. A normal country, a grown-up country, would be debating how much of the nation's wealth we want to put into health and education.
And Conservatives say ministers have ignored public priorities since they came to power.
Certainly the local government spending is one that has obviously been ignored. The priority in many of the areas of Scotland today are that local government services, roads, education should be well supported, and unfortunately in large areas of Scotland today people believe that that's not the case.
But the Executive stresses there's £17.7 billion available to spend next year, and if you want your say on how that should be carved up, you've got 2 months to get in touch. Brian Taylor, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
And you can submit your comments on how Scotland's budget should be spent by sending an email to News Online Scotland, and that's all one word, at bbc.co.uk. Or you can write to the Scottish Executive with your suggestions, and the address for that is on CFAX, page 172. The jobless total in Scotland has fallen again to a 24-year low. Last month saw a drop of 300 in the number of people out of work and claiming benefit, down to 123,600. Figures from the Office of National Statistics also show that average earnings increased by 6%. The Scottish Executive has been encouraged to do more to publicise its position on Section 28. But the local government committee, which has investigated the issue, has still backed plans for repeal of the legislation banning councils from promoting homosexuality in schools.
The high-profile tactics of the Keep the Clause campaign have dominated the headlines recently, while the executive has often been accused of failing to get their message across. Now MSPs on the local government committee are urging ministers to do more to put forward their case for repeal. With the exception of the Tory MSP Keith Harding, members of the committee say they're convinced that Section 28 is discriminatory and should be repealed. But they're calling on the executive to adopt a proactive approach to promoting its abolition, effectively implying that the case for repeal hasn't been properly made. As well as scrapping Section 28, the bill aims to establish a code of conduct for public bodies. The committee makes it clear that all devolved public bodies should be covered by the new Standards Commission, including local enterprise companies.
We need to have a time limit for the length of investigation, and we need to look at the possibility of the Standards Commission being able to move on a very serious offence, and I stress that, a very serious offence, to remove perhaps a convenership. We have to look at that. I think that we'll look at that as the bill progresses through Parliament, and I'm sure that we'll make those changes. I hope we will.
There's also the possibility of MSPs themselves being watched over by the Standards Commission, something the local government committee suggests might be considered. MSPs are set to debate the bill next week. Elizabeth Quigley, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Scotland's first scheme distributing fresh food to homeless people has been launched in Edinburgh. Crisis Fair Share Edinburgh collects 2 tonnes of surplus fresh food a week from shops and supermarkets and takes it to homeless projects around the city.
This food is surplus to supermarket requirements. It's past its display date, but not past its use-by date. So it's being donated to homeless projects instead of being dumped as waste.
The food we collect is taken from the supermarkets when it comes off their shelf and it's within its use-by date. So we take it rather than then throw it away, and we redistribute it to the homeless charities in Edinburgh.
This convent day centre makes 200 meals a day for homeless people. The fresh fruit and veg helps people living on the streets look after themselves and reduce the chances of illness.
It's terribly important for people who are roughing it, living out on the streets, to be able to come in and get a really balanced meal with lots of vitamin C and nicely prepared food.
Crisis Fair Share hopes to extend the scheme to other cities in Scotland if the volunteers and local business support can be found. Charities in Dundee and Glasgow have already expressed an interest. Maura Kinneborough, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
And now the weather forecast. Patchy rain will clear away from eastern areas and most of Scotland will have a bright day with sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers though will break out during the afternoon. The best of the sunshine will be in the west with temperatures reaching 12 Celsius. This evening central and eastern areas will end the day dry with some sunshine. The west will be cloudy though with some rain spreading to all parts overnight. And that's all from us for now. I'm back with an update over on BBC 2 Scotland at 5 to 4. Until then, from all of us, good afternoon.